So, I just posted a thing to Facebook about how the election doesn't freaking matter. How it's a show, it's a circus. No, you've heard these things before, you already know all this. But a bunch of supposedly pro-freedom people keep focusing on it like it matters. And they seem to have the mentality that, well, if we can get one of our clowns into the circus, then it's good. So I'm going to endorse Gary Johnson or McAfee or even Austin Petersen. I can't really fathom why the hell anybody who likes freedom would endorse Austin Petersen, or likes coherent thought for that matter. And so of course there are people who come out and say, well, yeah, but people like Ron Paul and the Libertarian Party started a lot of people in the direction that ended up with them being anarchists. And I say, yeah, and that's good. And the election had nothing to do with that. Hearing ideas had something to do with that. So how about, instead of trying to join the circus, trying to add our own clown to the circus, and playing their stupid game, when elections roll around, we take the opportunity to point out how stupid the game is, instead of participating in it and legitimizing it. Have a campaign of, hey, everybody get out there and don't freaking vote, because voting is bogus and stupid, and it won't ever achieve freedom, and it just legitimizes your own enslavement. Instead of, well, we'll play their game. You know, this game designed by tyrants, thinking that that's going to help freedom. And I really think, this may be a tad conspiratorial, but the 4-year thing seems designed to be just the right amount of time so that voters can forget how utterly frickin' pointless voting is. Like, it's long enough that they forget being disappointed by the other party when the other party was in power. But it's short enough that they feel like, well, if you're doing something bad, then in 4 years I'm going to vote against you. Because if there was an election every 20 years, they'd say, screw that, I'm not waiting around for that, I'm going to overthrow you or resist or whatever. So it's like just the right amount of interval to keep the subjects distracted and entertained and thinking they have some say in the matter. And for pro-freedom people to give attention, like, you can give attention to the election just to point out how stupid it is and how bogus the whole system is and how bogus democracy is and this, that, and the other thing. But to sort of play along and, like, have a candidate in the thing is just, like, you're starting by going downhill. And the excuse of, well, then we can spread the message. Like, the fact that you're running for president, before you say a single frickin' word, the fact that you're running for president reinforces the notion that democracy is legitimate, that whoever gets the most votes has the right to rule and has the right to legislate and do this stuff and this, that, and the other thing. So you already started with the wrong message before you said anything. And then what are you going to say? I want you to vote me into a position of political authority so I can point out that voting and political authority are both bogus. It's like, if you succeed in conveying your message, thinking people will recognize you as a hypocrite. Like, well, why did you run for office if running for office is bogus? Why didn't you just say it's bogus? Instead, it's like I'm gonna do whatever I can to be appointed pope to say that the Catholic Church sucks. Just like, well, A, you're not ever going to succeed, and B, why would you try to become pope? If that doesn't mean anything, if your whole point is that position is illegitimate and doesn't mean anything, and it's just a power-happy control freak. But they put on this spectacle and people pay attention to it because it's like, you know, dangling a fluffy thing in front of a cat. It can't look away, it has to play with it. Instead of just saying, that's just a fluffy thing. I don't care about a fluffy thing. I have a little bit more important things to do with my life. But when I say it doesn't matter, it all the way doesn't matter. Like for the next 4 years, it might slightly alter what gets done. Hardly any. But it might slightly alter it. In the long run, it alters nothing. The two parties take turns being in power. Left jackboot, right jackboot. It doesn't matter if it's that way or right jackboot, left jackboot. Either way, you're going to get stomped on by both jackboots. Both jackboots all the time, pretending it's one at a time. And every 4 years we go, oh, I'm sick of the left jackboot. I want the right jackboot. And people keep doing that, and it's just ridiculous. Now, there are two categories of ridiculousness that aren't quite equivalent that I see, quote-unquote, pro-freedom people doing. One is, the most ridiculous is pro-freedom people supporting Bernie or Trump. Like, supporting people who are openly collectivist authoritarian politicians. And people can say, oh, Trump isn't a politician. Well, what do you think he is? He's a slimy, lying, conniving, self-serving, power-happy freak. Like, no, he hasn't held political office yet, but he absolutely is a politician. And the fact that he's, like, rude and obnoxious, oh, that means he's one of us. Like, well, that's an interesting way to look at it. But no, he's not an outsider. He's given to campaigns. He said Hillary would make a great president. It's a joke to say that he's, like, anti-establishment. He is the establishment. So the most ridiculous thing is to vote for one of the two major parties thinking that, oh, well, the other one's just so bad that I have to vote for Trump or I have to vote for Bernie. That's just profoundly stupid. The slightly less stupid one is, I'm going to vote for libertarian candidate or something. But that's still pretty damn stupid. And the two levels of stupid of that are, one, you're going to lose. You're playing a game that you know you are going to lose. If you don't know that the libertarian candidate is going to lose and not become president, I don't even know what to say. He's not going to win. Whoever the nominee is, he's not going to become president, which means you're playing a game and legitimizing a game which you are guaranteed to lose. And if you then resort to saying, well, at least it gets the message out there, look at who the Libertarian Party, look at who the front runners are. None of them are libertarians. They've already compromised their principles. They've already sold out for attention and approval before they have any power at all. Before they have any influence. They have no power in the government. And they're already throwing the non-aggression principle out the window and advocating limited slavery. So to say, well, he's not going to win, but at least he'll spread the message. What message? The leading libertarian nominees are spreading the exact message that led to this authoritarian pile of crap, which is that limited slavery is a good idea. No, it freaking isn't. And again, it's the comparative thing. Well, we want something not as bad as what we have now. Well, how much not as bad, and well, what's the principle? What's the goal? What do you actually believe in? Is it just comparison? Are you just pointing to the other guy and saying he's worse than me? Because that isn't anything. And I don't know how to all the way describe this. If any, this will help. If any of the libertarian frontrunners right now were running as president against Thomas Jefferson back there, they would be seen as ridiculous authoritarian collectivists. Because compared to them, the Libertarian Party is drastically pro-government. Because if you ask them, well, what level of taxation do you think is reasonable? Well, maybe this level. It'll be way above what there was at the beginning of the country. Which means they're not even starting at that point. They're starting at a higher point, and the only thing they have going for them is what they advocate. The tyranny isn't quite as bad as what we have now, which is all the way a nothing position. Like, what does anybody think that's going to achieve when there's no principle and there's no specific goal other than let's not quite have it as bad as it is now? Like, that is what every voter has voted for the past 200 years. Every voter of every party has voted for let's have it not quite as bad as it is right now. No principle. They were all statists. They all wanted their agenda forced on other people. They all wanted people to forced to fund what they wanted, just like the libertarian candidates do. So what's the difference? In principle, there's none. There's no freaking difference. And I think part of it is this weird, I don't know what it is. It just seems to be like this biological desire to follow an alpha male, where people will be blinded by their desire to have a savior, and will support somebody based on their hallucinating him saying things and believing things that he didn't say and doesn't believe. And you look at the Libertarian Party. I mean, for example, Gary Johnson came out because he was asked this, I think it was by John Stossel even. He said, yes, a Jewish bakery should be forced to bake a cake for Nazis. You know, the conversation coming from with forcing the bakery that didn't want to make the cake for the gay wedding, and we're going to punish them and sue them. And Gary Johnson came down on the idiotic, authoritarian, collectivist side of that, and I think it was Stossel, I'm not sure. But then somebody asked him, well, does that principle apply across the board? Should a Jewish place be forced to make a cake for Nazis? And he said yes! And people are putting him up there as, we gotta listen to this guy, he's the libertarian frontrunner. He's not a libertarian! I got to see that in person when I asked him philosophical questions, and he either demonstrated that he's a complete moron or pretended to be a complete moron. Either way, doesn't exactly give me a whole lot of confidence, because he doesn't understand principles. And so his message isn't anything. His message is not pro-freedom. His message is bitching about the way things are. Guess what? That's the message of every politician. It was the message of Obama that got him elected. Hope and change. It's the message of every politician that the status quo sucks and we need something different. But what? What different? And if you listen to these quote-unquote libertarian candidates, you can't tell. They don't talk in terms of principles. They don't talk philosophy. They just bitch about the system as it is, without being able to say what should exist instead, like a stateless free society, perhaps. You won't ever hear Gary Johnson or McAfee talk about a stateless society. Or Austin Petersen. You'll hear him bitch about the idea. Oh no, we can't have freedom. So what is the message that anybody thinks is getting out there by running these clowns, these pseudo-libertarian clowns? Like, the most they are doing, they're not even doing nothing. They're doing something hugely counterproductive, which is making people associate the term libertarian with mush-headed, vague, unprincipled attention whores. Because that's absolutely what Austin is. He has no thought in his freaking head. The guy is an idiot. And he wants attention and he wants power. And if people associate that with libertarianism, we're going backwards. If that's the message that gets conveyed from the political campaign, we're going backwards. It's like if Bernie Sanders said, yeah, I'm an anarchist. And people who actually understand anarchism will be saying, what? No, you're not. You're big government, collectivist, statist. Shut up. But now you have libertarians pushing non-libertarians into the spotlight and saying they represent us, when these candidates are obviously collectivist statists. Because, well, it's better than what we have now. And it's so short-sighted. You're not spreading the message, you're ruining the message. You're distorting it and mangling it and perverting it and confusing it. First of all, by participating in the game at all. Second of all, by putting these statist clowns out there as representatives of quote-unquote libertarianism, when they're not. Now, McAfee, I'll admit, I don't know that much about what he actually believes, because he hardly ever says what he believes. He'll bitch about the way things are, and rightly so. And then he'll be a zany, mentally unstable character, which is sort of entertaining on occasion. But he's not conveying the message of freedom. Like, I'm looking for it in his message. I'm trying to find examples of the message of freedom in what McAfee says. When I understand, like, I already understand what self-ownership and non-aggression, all that. I understand what the message is supposed to be, and I'm looking for it in what he says. I've never seen it. I have seen him say things that are obviously statist, and admitting that the non-aggression principle is not a high priority for him. He said that in response to someone asking him a question. So, how do you think his quote-unquote message is going to make anybody out there who's a, mainstream statist, going to make them understand actual freedom and self-ownership and non-aggression when he doesn't say any of those things and he doesn't talk about any of those things? And so it's, advocating a watered-down, not even watered-down message. It's watered down to the point of not being there. It's a nothing message, other than what's there now sucks. Yeah, that's every political campaign ever, is the current regime sucks. We need something different, namely putting me in power. But to give the best people who want freedom could possibly do with an election is use the attention to make fun of the election and to make fun of the system and to make fun of democracy and the whole stupid ritual, instead of playing the game, instead of trying to get our own clown into the circus. And it's so frustrating to see people. I mean, Adam Kokesh rarely does things that I disagree with. I mean, he's done some things that tactically I might disagree with, but philosophically, usually what he says and what he believes in, I don't pay that close attention to him. But the things I've seen him said, yeah, rah, 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 you understand it. But he just endorsed McAfee. You endorsed anybody voting. Why would you give legitimacy to this ridiculous spectacle? And I think it's an attention thing. It's a game. It's like rooting for a football team. People can't just say, it doesn't matter to me. I don't care. The whole thing's stupid. So, oh well. But I'm looking forward to the election for one reason. Because when it happens, then it's over. And it'll be a few more years before we have to watch this idiotic spectacle again. I don't care who wins. It makes no freaking difference. It'll be left, it'll be right, and then it'll be the different one later on until people give up their statism, which is not going to happen by voting for somebody or by some pseudo-libertarian statist going out there and giving a mushy-headed message that most people think is extreme. And I'll end on that. Like, if you're going to be extreme and outside of the mainstream, at least be extreme and principled. And have an actual goal and say, yeah, aggression's wrong even when government does it. Individual owns himself, which means that no ruling class can be legitimate. Like, instead of appearing extreme while saying nothing, what are you going to achieve by that? By appearing extreme, Libertarian Party is very extreme, even though we can't tell what they believe because their front runners are vague as hell, and all they do is bitch about how things are. So, it's just so, the ideas are what matter. And the election turns into a personality thing. And it's just such a waste of time and such a distraction. Because nobody running for office dares to actually express the principles. Because, first of all, they'd be making a laughingstock of themselves. I'm running for office to declare that people in office don't have any power. Like, well, then why are you running? But Yeah, just the message and the ideas are very simple, and they get complicated and lost and confused by labeling statists who are looking for power as libertarians when they're just not. So hell with people, hell with personalities. I mean, individual people, not hell with people in general. It's the ideas that matter, and this campaign is not spreading those ideas. Now, I may make an exception for Darryl Perry, who actually believes in the non-aggression principle and self-ownership, but he's nowhere near one of the front runners because most of the members of the Libertarian Party are totally statists, and they don't understand their own philosophy, they don't understand freedom, they don't understand anything. They're just sort of this second-rate, sorry excuse for a political party trying to get their agendas forced on everybody else. So yeah, the only thing the election is good for is to use as an opportunity to point out how stupid and illegitimate it is. And in trying to do anything else with electoral politics isn't just a waste of time, it's hugely counterproductive. So, all right, so that is my rant for today.